The Asteria space station hummed with the cacophony of 1,000 voices, each speaking in their native tongues. The air was thick with the mingling scents of exotic foods, mechanical oil, and too many bodies pressed into too small a space. Flickering holographic advertisements cast an ethereal glow across the metal walkways, illuminating the diverse faces of traders, smugglers, and refugees who called this frontier outpost home. For the weak, Asteria was merciless, especially for humans. Cale knew this better than most. At 15, he was already a master at making himself invisible. His lanky frame slipped through the crowded marketplace, ragged clothes blending with the shadows cast by overhanging wires and pipes. His eyes, a striking blue that seemed out of place in his dirt-smudged face, darted continuously from side to side, alert for any sign of Xylo's Combine patrol officers. He couldn't afford to be caught. Not today. His friend Mira was getting worse. The makeshift oxygen regulator he'd cobbled together from salvage parts was failing, and without a proper energy stabilizer, she wouldn't last another cycle. The medical facilities in the human quarter were practically non-existent, another sign of the Combine's benevolent governance. Cale paused at the edge of the central marketplace, scanning the stalls for his target. His eyes locked onto a display of finely crafted Signian artifacts. Beyond the gleaming tools and intricate devices stood their creator, a Signian woman with iridescent feathers instead of hair, cascading down her back in shimmering waves of midnight blue and violet. Her amber eyes were focused on the delicate calibration of what appeared to be a navigation instrument. Perfect. She was distracted. Cale had spotted the energy stabilizer among her wares earlier that day. It was small, easily concealable, and exactly what he needed. Worth at least 3 months of scavenging, but Mira didn't have 3 months. He approached casually, pretending to browse the neighboring stall selling processed protein supplements. The Signian woman, Lyra, according to the holographic sign, continued her work, her slender fingers moving with precision over the instrument. Now or never. Cale sidled closer to her stall, timing his movement with a surge in the crowd. In one smooth motion, he reached out and grasped the stabilizer, tucking it into his sleeve. He had barely taken 2 steps when a firm grip closed around his wrist. Going somewhere with that? The Signian's voice was melodic yet firm, each word precisely enunciated in the common trade language. Cale's heart plummeted. He hadn't even seen her move. Up close, her eyes were even more striking, liquid amber with flecks of gold, reflecting an intelligence that made his skin prickle. "I don't know what you're talking about," he tried, tugging against her grip. Her grasp didn't budge. "The Type 7 quantum stabilizer you just took from my display. It's worth more than you'd make in a year of whatever it is you do." Cale's mind raced for a way out. He could try to break free, but the Signian species was known for their quick reflexes. He could create a scene, but that would draw the attention of patrol incoming, the Signian murmured, her gaze shifting to something over Cale's shoulder. Panic surged through him. Being caught by a vendor meant losing the stabilizer. Being caught by Xylo's Combine patrol meant being sent to a labor camp, or worse. To his astonishment, the Signian suddenly released her grip on his wrist and instead grabbed a nearby metal bowl, letting it clatter loudly to the ground. "Clumsy delivery boy," she exclaimed, her voice carrying across the marketplace. "Pick that up immediately and be more careful with my orders." Cale stared at her, bewildered, before understanding dawned. He quickly dropped to his knees, collecting the bowl and other small items she had deliberately scattered. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am," he mumbled, keeping his head down as the heavy boots of the patrol officers stomped past. "That's the 3rd time this week," she continued her charade, scolding him loudly until the patrol had moved well beyond earshot. When they were gone, her expression changed. She seized his arm again, this time pulling him behind her stall and through a narrow doorway into what appeared to be a workshop. Tools and half-finished projects covered every surface. She shut the door firmly behind them. "Now," she said, crossing her arms, "you're going to tell me exactly why you're willing to risk a combined labor camp for a quantum stabilizer." Cale backed up until he hit a workbench, cornered both literally and figuratively. The stabilizer, still concealed in his sleeve, suddenly felt heavy. "Why did you do that?" he asked instead of answering. "You could have just turned me in." The Signian woman studied him, her head tilting slightly to one side in a bird-like gesture. "I dislike the Combine more than I dislike thieves." "Marginally." She held out her hand. "The stabilizer, please." Cale hesitated, then slowly withdrew the device from his sleeve and placed it in her palm. "It's for my friend," he said finally. "She's sick. Respiratory failure. We've got a medical unit, but the stabilizer burned out last week. And you couldn't afford a new one." It wasn't a question. Cale's face hardened. Humans don't get fair prices in Combined territory. Not for anything. The Signian woman, Lyra, placed the stabilizer on a nearby table and leaned against it, studying him with those unsettling amber eyes. "What's your name?" "Cale," he answered, seeing no reason to lie now. "Cale," she repeated, as if testing the sound. "I'm Lyra, and I have a proposition for you." His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What kind of proposition?" "I need help. Someone quick with their hands and who knows their way around the station." She gestured at the workshop around them. "I'll give you the stabilizer for your friend. In return, you'll work for me until you've paid it off." Cale blinked. "You want to hire me? After I try to steal from you?" Lyra's feathers rustled slightly, the Signian equivalent of a shrug. "You're desperate, not malicious. There's a difference." Her gaze sharpened. "But if you ever try to steal from me again, I'll personally deliver you to the Combine with a ribbon tied around your wrist." "Understood." Cale nodded slowly, still not entirely believing his luck. "How do you know I won't just take the stabilizer and disappear?" For the first time, Lyra's lips curved into a small smile. "Because you're smart enough to recognize a good opportunity when you see one. And because I suspect your friend isn't the only person depending on you." She was right, of course. Cale had 3 younger kids in his makeshift family unit, all orphans like himself, scraping by in the forgotten corners of the station. "When do I start?" he asked. "Right now," Lyra said, handing him the stabilizer. "Take this to your friend first. Then come back. We have work to do." The first few days working for Lyra were awkward and tense. Cale performed the tasks she assigned, organizing tools, cleaning delicate components, running deliveries to trusted clients, with a sullen efficiency that spoke of his lingering distrust. For her part, Lyra maintained a professional distance, correcting his mistakes patiently, but never engaging in unnecessary conversation. But as days turned into weeks, something began to change. Cale found himself lingering in the workshop after hours, watching Lyra's skilled hands transform raw materials into beautifully functional devices. Her craftsmanship was unlike anything he'd seen before, a perfect fusion of art and engineering. The Signian tools she used were as mysterious as they were effective, operating on principles he couldn't begin to understand. Yet he wanted to understand. For perhaps the first time in his life, Cale found himself curious about something beyond mere survival. Lyra noticed his interest, but said nothing, allowing him to observe silently from the corner. Occasionally, she would explain a particular technique or the function of a specific tool, her melodic voice filling the workshop as Cale absorbed every word. The turning point came nearly a month into their arrangement. Lyra was working on a commission for a wealthy Syrian merchant, a complex stellar navigation device that would allow his ship to plot courses through dense nebula fields. She had been struggling with the calibration matrix for days, growing increasingly frustrated as each attempt failed to achieve the necessary precision. "The Syrian will be here tomorrow," she muttered, pushing away from her workbench in disgust. "This is impossible." Cale, who had been sorting a new shipment of components, glanced over at the abandoned project. He'd been watching her work on it all week, mentally cataloging each adjustment and result. "Have you tried bypassing the primary circuit?" he suggested hesitantly. Lyra turned to look at him, her feathers slightly ruffled in surprise. "That would destabilize the entire matrix." "Not if you reroute through a buffer first," Cale persisted, moving closer to the bench. "I've seen similar systems in the power distribution nodes in the lower levels. The station engineers use recycled power cells as buffers when the main grid fluctuates." Lyra's amber eyes narrowed. "Show me." With trembling hands, suddenly aware of how expensive the components before him were, Kale reconfigured the device's circuitry, explaining each step as he worked. He used a scavenge power cell as a temporary buffer, connecting it to the navigation matrix with a series of improvised adapters. When he finished, Lyra activated the device. The holographic display flickered, then stabilized, projecting a perfect three-dimensional map of the nearby Carina Nebula. "It works," she breathed, wonder evident in her voice. Kale allowed himself a small smile. "The cell will need to be replaced eventually. It's not a permanent solution. But it's brilliant," Lyra said, turning to face him fully. "Where did you learn to do this?" Kale shrugged uncomfortably. "Nowhere. Everywhere. You pick things up when your survival depends on it." Lyra studied him as if seeing him for the first time. "You have a gift, Kale. A natural understanding of systems and how they connect." She gestured to her workshop. "You could do so much more than scavenge and steal." "Not really an option for human orphans in combined territory," Kale replied, the bitterness in his voice unmistakable. "Perhaps not here," Lyra agreed. Her feathers shifted thoughtfully. "But there are other places. I know someone, a free trader captain named Forlag. He's always looking for crew with technical aptitude, especially those who can navigate the more challenging regions of space." Kale stared at her, unable to process what she seemed to be suggesting. "You want me to leave the station?" "I want you to have choices," Lyra corrected. "The kind I suspect you've never had before." For the next several months, Kale continued working in Lyra's shop, but with a new purpose. She began teaching him the fundamentals of Cygnian engineering, sharing knowledge that her people typically kept closely guarded. In return, Kale showed her the ingenious workarounds and adaptations he'd developed during years of scavenging in Asteria's forgotten sectors. Their relationship transformed from reluctant employer and employee to something closer to mentor and student, perhaps even friends, though neither would have admitted it aloud. Then, on the anniversary of their unusual meeting, Lyra received a message. Captain Forlag's ship, the Horizon's Edge, will be docking at Asteria in 3 days. He had agreed to interview Kale for a position. The morning of Kale's departure arrived too quickly. He stood awkwardly in Lyra's workshop, a small bag containing his few possessions slung over his shoulder. Captain Forlag, a gruff, four-armed cateran with a surprisingly gentle manner, waited outside, having already approved Kale for a trial period as a junior engineer. "I don't know how to thank you," Kale said, the words feeling inadequate. Lyra busied herself at her workbench, avoiding his eyes. "You more than repaid your debt. Your work these past months has been valuable." "Still," Kale insisted, "no one's ever believed in me before." Lyra finally looked at him, her amber eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. "Then I'm glad I was the first." She reached into a drawer and withdrew a small object, a Cygnian navigational amulet, its crystalline surface etched with constellations from her homeworld. "Take this. It's a tradition among my people, given to those embarking on journeys." Kale accepted it carefully, recognizing the significance of such a gift. "I'll keep in touch, through the secure channels." "See that you do," Lyra replied, her tone brisk once more. "I've invested too much in your education to have you disappear into the void." As Kale turned to leave, she added, more quietly, "Be careful out there, Kale." He nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the tightness in his throat, and walked away without looking back. 6 years passed in what felt like both an instant and an eternity. The secure channel communications between Kale and Lyra had been sporadic at first, then increasingly regular as he found his footing aboard the Horizon's Edge. He shared tales of his adventures and discoveries, while she kept him informed of developments on Asteria, most notably the Xylos Combine's ever-tightening grip on the station. For Kale, the years had been transformative. Under Captain Forlag's gruff but fair leadership, he had evolved from a skittish station rat into a respected pilot and engineer. His natural talent for spatial navigation and quick thinking in crisis situations had saved the crew more than once, earning him promotions and eventually his own quarters, a luxury he'd never imagined possible in his former life. He had grown physically as well, his once lanky frame filling out with lean muscle, his formerly haunted eyes now steady and confident. The street accent that had marked him as an Asteria urchin had faded, replaced by the more cosmopolitan speech patterns of someone who had navigated the diverse cultures of a dozen star systems. But through it all, Lyra remained a constant presence in his thoughts. The Signian navigational amulet never left his person, tucked securely in an inner pocket of his pilot's jacket. When Captain Forlag announced they would be returning to Asteria for a rare trading opportunity, Cale felt a nervous anticipation he hadn't experienced since his first solo navigation through the Carina Nebula. Asteria looked much the same as he remembered it. The same tangled architecture, the same overcrowded marketplaces, the same oppressive presence of Xylo's combined security forces. It also felt smaller somehow, less intimidating than the station that had dominated his childhood nightmares. Cale made his way through the familiar corridors, noting the increased number of security checkpoints and the haunted expressions of the station's inhabitants. The Combine's control had clearly tightened in his absence. When he reached the marketplace where Lyra's shop stood, he hesitated, suddenly uncertain. 6 years was a long time. What if she had moved on, left the station? What if she had changed, or he had changed too much? Taking a deep breath, he rounded the corner, and there it was. The same shop, with the same holographic sign displaying Lyra's Signian artifacts in multiple languages. Relief flooded through him. He stepped into the shop, the familiar sense of metal polish and ozone bringing back a rush of memories. A few customers browsed the displays, but his eyes immediately sought the workshop door at the back. Before he could approach it, it opened and Lyra emerged, carrying a newly completed navigation device. She stopped abruptly when she saw him, the device nearly slipping from her fingers. She looked exactly as he remembered, yet somehow more. The iridescent feathers that framed her face seemed to shimmer with even more vibrant colors, and her amber eyes widened in unmistakable recognition. "Cale," she breathed, setting the device down carefully on a nearby counter. "Lyra," he replied, suddenly aware of how different his voice must sound to her now, deeper, more assured. She moved toward him, stopping just short of arm's length, her eyes taking in every detail of his transformation. "You've grown." A smile tugged at his lips. That tended to happen over 6 years. Indeed, her own lips curved slightly upward, but her eyes remained searching, assessing. "You look well." "So do you," he said, meaning it. Despite the obvious strain of living under increasingly oppressive Combine rule, Lyra carried herself with the same quiet dignity he remembered. A curious customer interrupted them, and Lyra excused herself to complete the transaction. Cale took the opportunity to study her shop. The inventory had changed, incorporating new technologies and designs, but the essence remained the same: elegant Signian craftsmanship infused with practical innovation. When the customer departed, Lyra flipped the shop's status display to closed and gestured toward the workshop door. "We should talk privately." The workshop beyond was both familiar and different. New equipment lined the walls, and projects in various stages of completion cluttered the workbenches. Yet the organized chaos felt like coming home in a way that nothing had since he'd left Asteria. "Captain Forlag?" Lyra asked as she activated a signal scrambler, a new addition that spoke volumes about the current security situation. Still terrorizing the shipping lanes with his colorful language and impeccable ethics, Cale replied with a fond smile. "He sends his regards." "And you're his pilot now," Lyra observed. "Just as I predicted. Navigation specialist and senior engineer," Cale corrected with a hint of pride. "Though piloting is still my favorite duty." Lyra nodded approvingly. "I've heard rumors of the Horizon's Edge performing some rather impressive maneuvers through restricted territories, particularly areas under Combine blockade." Cale's expression turned guarded. "You shouldn't believe everything you hear in spaceport bars. And you shouldn't underestimate my sources of information," she countered smoothly. She tilted her head, studying him. "You're involved in the Resistance, aren't you?" There was no point denying it. "We transport supplies, sometimes people." Nothing that directly antagonizes the Combine. Yet, Lyra added perceptively. Yet Kale acknowledged. He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small device. I made this for you. Lyra accepted it curiously, turning the compact navigational tool over in her hands. Her eyes widened as she recognized the integration of modern technology with traditional Cygnian design principles. You combined a quantum positioning system with Cygnian celestial navigation methodology, she said, clearly impressed. Where did you learn our traditional navigation techniques? They're not included in any public database. Kale smiled. I had an excellent teacher who gave me a particular amulet. I've spent years studying it. Her feathers rippled with emotion, surprise, perhaps even pleasure. This is extraordinary, Kale. Thank you. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the years of separation dissolving in the familiar comfort of shared understanding. Then Lyra's expression grew serious. Things have changed here, Kale. The Combine is planning something. They've been arresting Cygnians, particularly those with knowledge of our old ways. 3 of my suppliers disappeared last month. Kale frowned. Why? What do they possibly want with Cygnian cultural knowledge? I'm not certain, Lyra admitted, her voice dropping lower. But there are rumors about the discovery of an ancient stellar cartography repository somewhere in the Cygnus Rift. If the Combine has somehow learned of it, they could control the fastest routes through the most resource-rich sectors of the galaxy. Kale finished, understanding immediately. No wonder they're targeting Cygnians. Lyra nodded grimly. I've managed to avoid suspicion so far by keeping my workshops focused on quaint cultural artifacts rather than serious navigation tools. But my network of contacts is being systematically dismantled. Kale stepped closer, the distance between them suddenly unbearable. Come with me, he said impulsively. The Horizon's Edge leaves in 3 days. Captain Forlag would welcome your skills, and you'd be safer away from Asteria. Lyra's feathers flattened against her head, a sign of distress among her people. I can't abandon my people here. Many rely on me for protection and information. Then let us help, Kale urged. The Resistance has been looking for a foothold on Asteria. With your network and our resources, we could make a difference. Lyra studied him, her amber eyes searching his. You've changed more than I realized, Kale. The boy I knew would never have suggested directly opposing the Combine. The boy you knew had never seen what happens to worlds under long-term Combine occupation, Kale replied grimly. I have. Trust me, Lyra, whatever's happening here is just the beginning. She was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. I'll introduce you to my contacts. But we proceed carefully. The Combine has spies everywhere. Agreed, Kale said. Then, unable to help himself, he added, It's good to see you again, Lyra. Really good. For the first time since his return, Lyra's expression softened completely, and she reached out to briefly touch his arm. Likewise, Kale. More than you know. Lyra's initial reluctance to directly confront the Xylos Combine was challenged the very next day. She and Kale had spent the evening planning, connecting his Resistance contacts with her network of Asteria informants. They had parted with the agreement to meet again the following morning to begin consolidating resources. But when Kale arrived at her shop, he found the entrance sealed with a combined security barrier, the official notice declaring it temporarily closed pending investigation of prohibited technologies. His blood ran cold. He immediately activated the secure communicator Lyra had given him the night before. Lyra, are you there? What's happened? There was a tense moment of silence before her voice came through, tight with controlled fear. They came at dawn. A full Combine security team, led by Commander Vok himself. I barely escaped through the maintenance shaft behind the workshop. They're searching the entire merchant quarter for me. Where are you now? Kale asked urgently. Sublevel 17, Section C. The old water recycling plant. But I can't stay long. They're scanning for Cygnian biosignatures. I'm coming to get you, Kale decided immediately. Stay hidden. No, they're watching for my known associates. Captain Forlag's ship. We'll be fine, Kale interrupted. Forlag has been evading combined detection for decades. Trust me, Lyra. Please. Another pause, then all right. But be careful. These aren't ordinary security forces. They're combined special operations. Kale's jaw tightened. Special operations meant the Combine considered this a high-priority situation, which confirmed their suspicions about the importance of whatever they believed Lyra knew. He made his way cautiously through the station's less monitored corridors, using the knowledge of Asteria's layout that had once been essential to his survival. It took nearly 2 hours of careful navigation to reach Sublevel 17 without encountering patrols. The abandoned water recycling plant was a cavernous space, filled with the hulking shadows of decommissioned machinery. The air was thick with moisture and the scent of mineral deposits. Lyra, Kale called softly, his hand resting on the blaster concealed beneath his jacket. A slight movement from behind an ancient filtration tank caught his attention. Lyra emerged cautiously, her feathers dulled with dust, and her elegant clothing exchanged for a nondescript station worker's coverall. "You shouldn't have come," she said, even as relief flickered across her features. "Probably not," Kale agreed, crossing to her quickly. "But I've never been good at doing what I should." He scanned her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, just shaken. They knew exactly what they were looking for, Kale. They had detailed schematics of my workshop, knew about compartments I've shown to no one. Her amber eyes met his. "Someone betrayed me. We'll figure that out later," Kale said firmly. "Right now, we need to get you somewhere. Safe. Where?" "The Combine controls all ships entering and leaving Asteria." "Not all of them," Kale corrected with a grim smile. "The Horizon's edge has certain modifications that make it invisible to standard Combine scanners." Lyra's eyes widened. "You came in a stealth ship? No wonder you've been able to support the Resistance so effectively." "It's not full stealth technology, nothing that advanced. Just enough to confuse and misdirect their systems," Kale explained. "But we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more likely they'll expand their search perimeters to include these lower levels." As if on cue, the distant sound of a security alert echoed through the station's public announcement system. "Attention, all citizens. By order of Commander Vok, Asteria is now under Level 1 security protocols. All residents are required to present identification at established checkpoints. Reports of Cygnian terrorist Lyra Stellaris should be directed to Combined Security immediately. Rewards for information." Kale switched off his communicator, cutting off the announcement. "Terrorist? That's new. It's standard Combined procedure," Lyra replied bitterly. "Label anyone who opposes them as a threat to public safety." Her feathers rippled with suppressed anger. "But this is worse than I thought. Level 1 security means they've locked down all docking ports." Kale's mind raced. "We need a diversion. Something big enough to force them to redirect security resources." He activated his communicator again, this time on a different frequency. "Captain, it's Kale. We have a situation." Captain Forlag's gravelly voice responded immediately. "I'm aware, boy. Half the station is crawling with Combine troops, asking about your Cygnian friend. We need extraction, and we need it fast." There was a pause, then Forlag chuckled. "Already ahead of you. Be at Maintenance Airlock 22 in 1 hour. And be prepared for some excitement." The connection cut off abruptly. Lyra looked at Kale questioningly. "What is he planning?" "With Forlag, it's better not to ask too many questions," Kale replied with a wry smile. "But whatever it is, it'll be effective. Come on, we need to get to Deck 7. They navigated the station's maintenance tunnels and emergency passageways, systems that Kale had once known as intimately as the lines on his palm. Twice they had to hide as Combined patrols passed, their heavy boots echoing ominously in the narrow corridors. As they neared Deck 7, a sudden explosion rocked the station, followed by multiple alarms and the sound of emergency bulkheads slamming shut. "That would be our diversion," Kale murmured, checking his chronometer. "Right on schedule." "What did he do?" Lyra asked, alarmed. "If I know Forlag, something very loud but ultimately harmless," Kale assured her. "Probably detonated a few low-yield explosives in an uninhabited sector. just enough damage to require all hands on deck for emergency protocols. Sure enough, the security announcement shifted, ordering all available personnel to Deck 12 to combat a critical infrastructure failure. Taking advantage of the chaos, they made their way to Maintenance Airlock 22, a small emergency exit point that was rarely used and even more rarely monitored. Captain Forlag was waiting for them, his 4 arms crossed over his massive chest, a disreputable-looking pressure suit already prepared for Lyra. "Cutting it close, aren't you?" he growled, though Kale could detect the underlying concern in his captain's tone. "Get suited up. We got about 10 minutes before they realized the explosions were a diversion." As Lyra donned the pressure suit, Forlag pulled Kale aside. "This is more than a simple rescue mission, isn't it? The Combine doesn't deploy special operations for Signian craftsmen selling regulated technology." Kale hesitated, then replied quietly, "It's about the Cygnus Rift. They think she knows something about an ancient navigation repository." Forlag's eyes widened, all 4 of his pupils dilating in surprise. "The star paths? Those are a myth, boy." "Maybe not," Kale said, glancing at Lyra. "Either way, the Combine believes they're real, and they think Lyra can lead them there." "Can she?" Kale met his captain's gaze steadily. "I don't know, but I'm not letting the Combine find out first." Forlag studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Always knew you'd bring trouble to my ship someday." A grin split his craggy face. "Just didn't expect it to be this interesting. Let's go." The journey through open space to where the horizon's edge waited was harrowing. They had to navigate between the station's external sensor arrays, timing their movements to coincide with the blind spots created by Forlag's diversion. When they finally reached the ship and cycled through the airlock, Kale felt a weight lift from his shoulders, only to be replaced immediately by new concerns. The Combine wouldn't let this go easily. "Get us out of here, Kale," Forlag ordered as they shed their pressure suits. "Maximum stealth protocols. Set course for the Vesper Nebula. We can lose any pursuit in the radiation fields." Kale nodded, heading straight for the navigation console. His fingers flew over the familiar controls, plotting a course that would take them away from Asteria as quickly and inconspicuously as possible. Behind him, he heard Forlag introducing Lyra to the rest of the crew, a diverse collection of species united by their opposition to Combine rule. Each had their own reason for joining the Resistance, their own story of Combine oppression. As the horizon's edge slipped away from Asteria, its signature masked by the radiation emissions from the station's own power core, Kale allowed himself a moment of reflection. 6 years ago, he had left this station as a boy seeking opportunity. Now he returned as a man, only to leave again as a marked enemy of the Xylos Combine. And through it all, Lyra remained a constant. The one who had seen potential in him when he was nothing more than a desperate thief, and who now stood beside him as they faced an uncertain future together. Life had a strange way of coming full circle. The first few days aboard the Horizon's edge were tense. Though they had escaped Asteria without detection, everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the Combine expanded their search. Commander Vok was not known for giving up easily, especially when faced with humiliation. Lyra adapted quickly to life aboard the ship, her natural grace and quick mind earning the respect of the crew. She spent hours in the engineering bay with Kale, marveling at the modifications he and Forlag had made to the ship's systems over the years. "You've integrated Cateran phase technology with standard human propulsion systems," she observed, examining the engine configuration. "I didn't think that was possible." Kale smiled, enjoying her appreciation of his work. It wasn't, according to every engineering manual. But conventional wisdom doesn't account for desperation and creativity. "The story of your life, it seems," Lyra remarked, a warmth in her amber eyes that made Kale's heart beat faster. Their professional admiration and friendship was evolving into something deeper, though neither had explicitly acknowledged it. There were moments, a lingering glance, a touch that lasted slightly longer than necessary, that spoke of feelings beyond mere comradeship. But the looming threat of the Combine kept such personal matters secondary. On the 5th day, Captain Forlag called them both to the bridge for a council of war. The ship's intelligence officer, a former Combine analyst named Turan, had compiled a disturbing report. The Combine has deployed 12 hunter-killer vessels specifically configured for tracking Signian biosignatures, Turan explained, displaying a holographic map of nearby sectors. They're methodically searching every possible escape route from Asteria. That's extreme, Forlag growled, his four arms crossed over his massive chest. Even for Vok. It confirms our suspicions, Kale said grimly. Whatever they believe Lyra knows, it's valuable enough to commit significant resources to finding her. All eyes turned to Lyra, who stood by the viewport. Her feathers slightly bristled with tension. The star paths, she said finally, her melodic voice unusually solemn. The ancient navigation routes of my ancestors. That's what they're after. You actually know about them? Forlag asked, surprise evident in his gravelly voice. Lyra nodded slowly. Not just about them. I know where to find them. A stunned silence fell over the bridge. The star paths aren't myths, she continued, moving to the holographic display. They're real navigation routes created by ancient Signians, pathways through space-time that exist outside normal stellar cartography. Faster than light travel without conventional drives, Kale said softly, understanding dawning. That's why the Combine wants this so badly. Lyra nodded. The knowledge was preserved by certain Signian lineages passed down through generations. My grandmother was a keeper, one of those entrusted with the secrets. She hesitated, then added, I never told you the full truth about my abilities, Kale. What abilities? Forlag demanded, leaning forward with interest. Instead of answering directly, Lyra closed her eyes. The feathers around her face began to glow subtly, emitting a soft blue luminescence. When she opened her eyes again, they had transformed from amber to a radiant sapphire blue. I can sense them, she said, her voice taking on a resonant quality that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. The currents of space, the hidden paths between stars. Kale stared in wonder. In all their time together on Asteria, she had never revealed this aspect of herself. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, unable to keep the hurt from his voice. The glow faded, and Lyra's eyes returned to their normal amber color. Because it made me a target, Kale. The Combine has been hunting Signian pathfinders for decades. I've spent my life hiding what I am. Her gaze softened, even from those I trusted. Well, hiding isn't an option anymore, Forlag pointed out pragmatically. If the Combine is deploying this many resources, they must have confirmed suspicions about your abilities. The question is, what do we do now? Turan asked, looking from Lyra to Forlag. Kale stepped forward, his decision already made. We find the star paths before the Combine does. We secure them for the Resistance. That's insane, one of the crew members protested. We're one ship against the entire combined fleet. But we have something they don't, Kale countered, looking at Lyra, a pathfinder who actually wants to help us. Lyra met his gaze, uncertainty warring with determination in her expression. The repository is hidden in a place the Combine would never think to look, a decaying stellar remnant in the heart of the Cygnus Rift. It's dangerous, unstable. We'd be risking everything just to get there. We're already risking everything, Forlag rumbled. Might as well make it count. He turned to the crew. I won't order anyone to join this mission. It's volunteer only. One by one, the crew members stepped forward, signaling their commitment. They were a random collection of species united by their hatred of the Combine and their loyalty to Forlag, and by extension, to Kale. Well then, Forlag said with a feral grin, I guess we're hunting for star paths. Kale, set course for the Cygnus Rift. As Kale took his position at the navigation console, Lyra approached him, her expression troubled. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. Once we enter the rift, there's no turning back. The Combine will label everyone aboard as terrorists and enemies of the state. Kale's hands paused over the controls. Would you believe me if I said I've never been more certain of anything in my life? Actually, yes, Lyra replied with a small smile. You always were stubborn. I prefer determined, Kale corrected, returning her smile. Then, more seriously, we can't let the Combine get this, Lyra. You've seen what they do with conventional power. Imagine what they do with control of the star paths. I know, she sighed. It's just, my people have protected this secret for generations. To reveal it now is necessary, Kale finished gently. Some secrets are meant to be shared when the time is right. Lyra studied him, her amber eyes thoughtful. When did you become so wise? Had a good teacher, Kale replied with a wink, turning back to the navigation console. The journey to the Cygnus Rift would take 3 days at maximum speed. 3 days in which the Combine would be closing in from all directions. They would need to be fast, smart, and more than a little lucky. But with Lyra's guidance and his piloting skills, Kale believed they had a chance. A small one, perhaps, but sometimes a small chance was all you needed to change everything. The Horizon's Edge raced through space, its modified engines pushing to their limits as they headed for the mysterious region known as the Cygnus Rift, a chaotic sector of space where radiation storms and gravitational anomalies made conventional navigation nearly impossible. The journey was fraught with tension. Twice they detected combined hunter-killer vessels at the edge of their sensor range, forcing Kale to plot emergency course changes through increasingly dangerous territory. The ship groaned under the strain, and several systems failed under the pressure, requiring round-the-clock repairs from the engineering team. Through it all, Lyra worked closely with Kale, revealing more about her Pathfinder abilities and the secret history of her people. In quiet moments between crises, they grew closer, not just as allies in a desperate mission, but as two souls recognizing something profound in each other. My grandmother said the Pathfinder gift appears in only 1 in 1,000 Cygnians, Lyra explained as they studied star charts in the navigation bay. She recognized it in me when I was just a fledgling, the way I could sense patterns in space that others couldn't see. Is that why you became a craftsman? Kale asked, fascinated by this new dimension of the woman he thought he knew. Lyra nodded. It was a way to use my abilities without drawing attention. The patterns I sense, they translate beautifully into physical designs. Her expression grew distant, but it was always just a cover. My grandmother trained me in secret, preparing me to someday help my people reclaim their heritage. And now I'm about to reveal our greatest secret to outsiders, she said with a rueful smile. Somehow I don't think this is what my grandmother had in mind. Kale reached across the console and took her hand. You're saving lives. Lyra, if the Combine gets control of the star paths. I know, she interrupted gently. It's just hard to break with thousands of years of tradition. The best traditions adapt with time, Kale said. Otherwise, they become chains instead of guides. Lyra looked at him with new appreciation. When did the thief I caught become a philosopher? Around the same time the craftsman I worked for revealed herself as a mystical space navigator, he replied with a grin. Their laughter was interrupted by the ship's alarm. Kale's fingers flew over the console, bringing up the sensor readings. Combined vessels, he announced grimly. 3 of them closing fast. Captain Forlag's voice came over the intercom. Battle stations. Kale, get up here. As the ship lurched into defensive maneuvers, Kale and Lyra exchanged a look that conveyed everything they hadn't yet said to each other. The growing feelings, the fears, the hope for a future beyond this desperate mission. Then they were racing to the bridge, all personal matters set aside in the face of immediate danger. The ensuing battle pushed the Horizon's Edge and its crew to their limits. The Combine vessels were faster, more heavily armed, and coordinated with military precision. Only Kale's extraordinary piloting skills and intimate knowledge of the ship's capabilities kept them from being destroyed outright. We can't outrun them, Taran shouted over the sound of failing systems. And we're still 6 hours from the rift. We need a diversion, Forlag growled, gripping his command chair as the ship shuddered under another hit. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes beginning to glow with that ethereal blue light. I can create one. Lyra, no, Kale protested, understanding her intention. Using your abilities will only confirm to the Combine what you are. They already know, she replied calmly. and we have no choice. Before anyone could stop her, she placed her hands on the navigation console. The feathers around her face and arms began to glow brightly, and her eyes blazed with sapphire fire. Through the viewports, the starfield seemed to ripple and distort. A shimmering pattern appeared in space directly ahead of them, a faint outline that resembled a doorway made of light. "What is that?" Forlag demanded, awe evident in his gruff voice. "A glimpse of a star path," Lyra replied, her voice strained with effort. "Not a real one, just an echo, a reflection, but should confuse their sensors." Kale understood immediately. "They'll think we've accessed a path. They'll have to follow." "Exactly," Lyra confirmed. "But we need to move quickly. I can't maintain this for long." Kale's hands flew over the controls, plotting a new course that would take them away from the false star path, while the Combine vessels investigated the anomaly. The gambit worked. The pursuing ships broke off direct engagement, converging instead on the shimmering apparition Lyra had created. By the time they realized the deception, the horizon's edge had gained valuable distance. Lyra collapsed as the illusion faded, her feathers dulled, and her breathing labored. Kale caught her before she hit the deck. "I'm all right," she assured him weakly. "Just drained. It takes considerable energy to manipulate space perception like that." "Get her to medical," Forlag ordered, concern evident beneath his gruff exterior. "Kale, stay on course for the rift. They'll be after us again as soon as they realize what happened." The respite bought by Lyra's diversion gave them the edge they needed. 6 hours later, the horizon's edge entered the swirling chaos of the Cygnus Rift, where conventional sensors and navigation systems began to fail. Now they were in Lyra's domain. Despite her exhaustion, she insisted on returning to the bridge as they penetrated deeper into the rift. The view through the forward ports was both terrifying and beautiful. Swirling clouds of ionized gas illuminated by the radiation of dying stars, gravitational eddies that twisted light itself into impossible patterns. "Standard navigation is useless here," Kale announced, watching his instruments fluctuate wildly. "We're flying blind." "Not blind," Lyra corrected, her voice stronger now. "Just using different senses." She approached the navigation console again, but this time Kale rose from his seat. "You're not recovered enough," he insisted. "I don't need to create another illusion," she explained. "Just to see the true paths." She gestured to the pilot's chair. "But I'll need your help to follow them." Understanding dawned. "Con navigación." Lyra nodded. "I'll sense the paths. You'll pilot us through them." It was unprecedented, a Cygnian pathfinder directly guiding a non-Cygnian pilot. But these were unprecedented times. As the rest of the crew watched in tense silence, Lyra stood behind Kale's chair, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. Her eyes began to glow once more, though less intensely than before. "There," she murmured, pointing to what appeared to be a particularly dense cluster of radiation. "A current runs through that formation. Follow it precisely." Trusting her completely, Kale directed the ship toward what looked like certain destruction. The crew held their breath as they approached the swirling maelstrom. "Now slight descent. Adjust 30 degrees port. Hold this course steady," Lyra directed, her voice taking on that strange resonant quality. To everyone's amazement, the ship slipped through the chaotic energies unharmed, as if navigating a calm channel through turbulent waters. For hours, they continued this way, Lyra sensing the hidden currents of space that her ancestors had mapped millennia ago, Kale executing the precise maneuvers required to follow them. It was a dance of absolute trust and perfect coordination, their minds working in such harmony that they began to anticipate each other's thoughts. Finally, they emerged into a relatively calm pocket of space dominated by the spectacular sight of a dying star. A red giant collapsed into a dense neutron star, still surrounded by the glowing remnants of its former envelope. "The Cygnian repository," Lyra announced, her voice filled with reverence and awe. Hidden in the one place no one would think to look, the heart of a stellar graveyard. As they approached the neutron star, a structure became visible, an ancient space station of distinctly non-human design, orbiting perilously close to the deadly radiation fields. "It's beautiful," Kale breathed, taking in the elegant, organic lines of the structure. It resembled nothing so much as a massive crystalline flower, its petals spread to catch the light of the dying star. "The work of my ancestors," Lyra confirmed, a mixture of pride and sorrow in her voice. "Built 10,000 years ago, when the Cygnian stellar empire spanned this entire sector." "How do we approach?" Forlag asked, practical as always. "Those radiation levels would kill most of us in minutes." "There's a docking protocol," Lyra explained. "A specific approach vector that activates the station's protective fields." She turned to Kale. "I'll need to guide you again. The margin for error is very small." The docking procedure was the most demanding piloting challenge Kale had ever faced. The approach required navigating through fluctuating radiation fields, following a precise path that seemed to make no logical sense, spiraling inward toward the station rather than approaching directly. But with Lyra's guidance, they succeeded. As they completed the final spiral, a shimmering field extended from the station, enveloping the horizon's edge and pulling it gently into a docking cradle designed for ships of a very different era. "We made it," Turan breathed, unable to contain his relief and excitement. "The hard part's just beginning," Forlag cautioned, ever the pragmatist. "The Combine won't be far behind. They have pathfinders of their own now, unwilling ones, but effective nonetheless." Lyra's expression darkened at this reminder of her captured kinsman. "Then we need to work quickly." She turned to Kale. "The repository contains not just the star path maps, but the technology to access them. We need to secure both before the Combine arrives." As they prepared to board the ancient station, Kale found a moment alone with Lyra in the airlock chamber. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we access the repository, there's no going back. The knowledge of the star paths will be out in the galaxy again, for better or worse." Lyra's amber eyes met his, resolute but tinged with sadness. "My grandmother always said knowledge itself isn't good or evil. It's what people do with it that matters." She took his hand, her slender fingers intertwining with his. "I trust what you'll do with it, Kale." The simple statement, loaded with meaning, hung between them. Kale squeezed her hand gently. "I won't let you down," he promised. "Not now, not ever." The ancient Cygnian station was unlike anything Kale had ever experienced. The interior spaces were vast and organic, with corridors that seemed to have been grown rather than built. Bioluminescent panels provided soft, ambient lighting that responded to their presence, brightening as they moved through the seemingly abandoned structure. "It's still operational after all this time," Forlag marveled, running one of his 4 hands along a wall that hummed faintly at his touch. "The station is semi-sentient," Lyra explained, leading them deeper into the complex. "It's been in hibernation mode, conserving energy until Cygnians returned." "How did your people build something like this?" Kale asked, fascinated by the technology that defied his understanding of engineering. "We didn't, not exactly," Lyra replied. "Cygnian technology at its height was symbiotic, part mechanical, part biological. We grew our structures as much as we built them." The central chamber of the station was a breathtaking space, a perfect sphere with a diameter of at least 100 meters. At its center floated a complex crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light, like a heart beating in slow motion. "The Star Path Repository," Lyra breathed, her feathers bristling with emotion. The last complete record of all known paths. As they approached the central crystal, its pulsing intensified. Streams of light emerged from its core, coalescing into a holographic projection that filled the entire chamber. A 3-dimensional map of the galaxy unlike any conventional chart. Instead of showing stars and systems in their actual positions, it displayed a complex network of glowing lines connecting seemingly unrelated points in space. "The star paths," Forlag whispered, temporarily replacing his usual gruffness. "Not all of them," Lyra corrected. "Just the ones my ancestors discovered and mapped. There are likely many more." Kale studied the map with a pilot's eye. "These could change everything." With these paths, smaller ships could outmaneuver combined fleets, deliver supplies to blockaded systems, or launch precision strikes against key combined facilities. Turan added, the former analyst's mind already calculating strategic applications. We need to download this data, Forlag decided, looking around for something resembling a computer interface. Lyra shook her head. It doesn't work that way. The repository isn't just information, it's a key. The actual navigation requires a pathfinder. Then what are we doing here? Turan asked, confusion evident in his voice. If we can't take the paths without you, we can create new pathfinders, Lyra interrupted. That's the true purpose of this place. She approached the crystal, placing her hands on its surface. It responded to her touch, the light within swirling and intensifying. My ancestors discovered that the Pathfinder ability isn't solely genetic, she explained, her voice taking on that resonant quality again. It can be awakened in those with the potential. This repository contains the means to identify that potential and activate it. A new holographic display appeared, a complex scanning system designed to test for Pathfinder compatibility. We can test each of you, Lyra continued. Those with potential can undergo the awakening process. It's not without risk, but she never finished the sentence. A massive explosion rocked the station, sending them all staggering. They found us, Forlag growled, activating his comm unit. Report. The frantic voice of his second officer came through. Combined assault ships, Captain. At least 5 of them. They've deployed boarding parties. We're trying to hold them off, but the transmission cut off in a burst of static. They're here for the repository, Lyra said, her face pale beneath her feathers. We have to protect it at all costs. How? Turan demanded. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in this station. Kale's mind raced through possibilities, discarding each as quickly as it formed. Then his eyes fell on the crystal again, and an idea took shape. We don't need to win, he said slowly. We just need to control who gets the knowledge. He turned to Lyra. Can you activate the awakening process now? For all of us with potential. She stared at him, understanding dawning. Yes, but Kale, it's dangerous. Without proper preparation, the process could kill you. It's our only chance, he insisted. If even a few of us survive and become pathfinders, we can use the star paths to escape and keep the knowledge from the Combine. Forlag stepped forward. The boy's right. Better we try than let Vok get his hands on this. Another explosion shook the station, closer this time. The sounds of weapons fire echoed down the corridors. Lyra looked from Kale to Forlag, then nodded decisively. Stand in the circle, she instructed, indicating a pattern on the floor surrounding the crystal. I'll begin the process. As they positioned themselves, Lyra placed both hands on the crystal and closed her eyes. The feathers around her face began to glow with that now familiar blue light, but much more intensely than before. The crystal responded, its pulsing quickening to match her heartbeat. Pathfinder Awakening Protocol, Emergency Implementation. She spoke in a language Kale didn't recognize, presumably ancient Signian. The crystal flashed acknowledgement, and beams of light extended from it to touch each person standing in the circle. Kale felt a sensation like ice and fire simultaneously flowing through his veins. His vision blurred, then sharpened to an almost painful clarity. The universe seemed to expand around him, revealing dimensions and patterns he had never perceived before. Through the haze of transformation, he was dimly aware of Commander Vok and his combined troops bursting into the chamber, weapons raised. Stop them! Vok's voice echoed strangely in Kale's altered perception. Don't. Let them complete the process. Weapons fire erupted across the chamber. One of their crew fell, then another. Forlag roared in defiance, returning fire with his own blaster despite the disorientation of the awakening process. Kale fought to maintain consciousness, focusing on Lyra. She stood unwavering at the crystal, her entire body now glowing with blue-white energy as she channeled the ancient power of her ancestors. Their eyes met across the chaos of battle. In that moment, a wordless understanding passed between them. This might be the end, but what they had started here would continue. The crystal pulsed one final time, releasing a blinding flash that filled the entire chamber. Kale felt something fundamental shift within him, a new sense awakening, like a third eye opening to see the universe's hidden structures. As his vision cleared, he saw Lyra slumped against the crystal, exhausted but triumphant. Around the chamber, combined soldiers lay stunned by the energy pulse, temporarily incapacitated. Only Commander Vok remained standing, his face contorted with rage as he raised his weapon, aiming directly at Lyra. "No!" Kale shouted, but he was too far away to intervene physically. Instead, acting purely on instinct, he reached out with his newly awakened Pathfinder senses. To his astonishment, he could perceive a small star path, a tiny fold in space, directly between Vok and Lyra. Without understanding how, Kale opened it. The energy blast from Vok's weapon disappeared into the miniature path and emerged behind the commander, striking one of his own troops. Vok's expression of shock gave Kale the moment he needed. He raced across the chamber, tackling the Combine commander to the ground. They grappled briefly before Kale landed a solid blow that rendered Vok unconscious. "Kale!" Lyra called weakly from the crystal. "It worked. You're a Pathfinder now." He hurried to her side, supporting her as she struggled to stand. "What about the others?" She glanced around the chamber. Forlag was helping Turon to his feet, both of them looking disoriented but alive. Several other crew members were also stirring. Some survived the process, she confirmed. Enough to carry on the knowledge. The station shuddered violently, warning alarms blaring through the ancient systems. The combined attack damaged the station's structural integrity, Turon reported, checking a newly activated display panel. "We have maybe 10 minutes before catastrophic failure." "The horizon's edge?" Forlag demanded. Turon shook his head grimly. No response from the crew. "We must assume it's been captured or destroyed." "Then we're trapped," one of the surviving crew members concluded, despair evident in his voice. "No," Lyra contradicted, straightening with renewed determination. "We have Pathfinders now." She turned to Kale. "You open a path instinctively to save me. With my guidance, you can open a larger one, enough to get us all to safety." "I don't know how," Kale admitted. "It just happened. Trust your new senses," Lyra encouraged him, taking his hands. "I'll help you." Together, they stepped to the center of the chamber. Lyra's feathers began to glow again, though more dimly than before, her energy nearly depleted. "Focus on a destination," she instructed. "Somewhere far from here, somewhere safe." Kale closed his eyes, concentrating on the one place in the galaxy he associated with absolute safety. The hidden asteroid belt where he and Forlag had established a resistance outpost years earlier. With Lyra's guidance, he reached out with his new Pathfinder senses, feeling for the currents of space-time that connected here to there. To his amazement, he found one, a thin, barely perceptible thread linking the 2 points across hundreds of light years. "I feel it," he whispered in awe. "Now open it," Lyra instructed, her voice strained with effort. "Imagine pulling apart the fabric of space, just enough for us to step through." Kale focused all his will on the task, visualizing the path widening. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a shimmering doorway of light began to form in the center of the chamber. A star path, opened by human hand for the first time in history. "Everyone through now," Forlag ordered, helping the injured crew members toward the opening. One by one, they stepped into the light and vanished. Turon hesitated at the threshold. "What about the repository? We can't let the Combine have it." "They won't," Lyra assured him. The awakening protocol included a security measure. The crystal is already purging its data. When a station collapses, nothing will remain for them to find. Satisfied, Turon nodded and stepped through the path. As the station began to break apart around them, Kale turned to Lyra. "Together?" She smiled, exhausted but radiant. Together, hand in hand, they stepped through the star path just as the ancient Signian station collapsed behind them. They emerged into the familiar surroundings of the Resistance outpost, a series of habitats built into a massive asteroid, hidden from combined sensors by the dense mineral deposits all around them. The star path closed behind them with a soft pulse of light, leaving no trace of its existence. Forlag was already organizing the survivors, getting the injured to the medical bay and debriefing those still on their feet. For a moment, Kale and Lyra simply stood together, processing everything that had happened. They had lost the horizon's edge and several good people, but they had saved the knowledge of the star paths from the Combine and awakened new Pathfinders who could use that knowledge to fight back. What happens now? Kale asked quietly. Lyra turned to face him, her amber eyes clear and determined despite her exhaustion. Now we build something new, a network of Pathfinders, a true resistance with the ability to strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. And us? Kale asked, the question encompassing far more than just their role in the coming conflict. Lyra's feathers rippled with emotion. When I caught a human boy stealing from my shop all those years ago, I never imagined I'd one day marry him. She smiled, the warmth of it reaching her eyes. Yet here we are. Kale blinked in surprise. Is that a proposal? Is that acceptance? She countered, her smile widening. Instead of answering with words, Kale pulled her gently into his arms and kissed her, their first kiss, but one that had been years in the making. Around them, the resistance outpost hummed with activity as the survivors began integrating into the existing operation. Word of the successful mission, the acquisition of star path knowledge and the creation of new Pathfinders, spread quickly, igniting hope in a movement that had long fought against overwhelming odds. A year later, Kale stood at the viewport of a small but swift vessel, watching the stars streak by as he navigated a star path of his own creation. Beside him, Lyra monitored the ship's systems, her expert hands making minute adjustments to maintain optimal performance. They had been married 6 months earlier in a ceremony that blended human and Signian traditions, with Captain Forlag officiating. The massive Cateran had surprised everyone with the depth of emotion in his speech about finding family among the stars. In the time since their escape from the Signian repository, they had built a network of Pathfinders throughout the galaxy. Former Resistance fighters awakened to their potential, along with liberated Signians rescued from combined captivity. Together, they had transformed the nature of the Resistance, using the star paths to deliver supplies to occupied worlds, evacuate endangered populations, and strike at combined facilities with unprecedented precision. For the first time in decades, the Xylos Combine was on the defensive. Approaching exit point, Kale announced, feeling the familiar sensation of the path beginning to thin as they neared their destination. Ready for transition, Lyra confirmed, her feathers glowing softly in the dim light of the bridge. The ship emerged from the star path into orbit around a lush green world, one of the newest free colonies established beyond combined space. Below them, a settlement was taking shape, populated by refugees and former resistance fighters who had chosen to build a new life rather than continue fighting. Home sweet home, Kale said with satisfaction, initiating landing procedures. As they descended toward the settlement, Lyra rested a hand on her slightly swollen abdomen, the first Signian human child ever conceived, a living symbol of the new future they were building. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't caught you stealing that day, she mused. Kale reached over to cover her hand with his own. I would have found my way to you eventually, he said with certainty. Some paths are meant to be followed, no matter how unlikely they seem. Lyra smiled, leaning over to kiss him briefly. Says the human Pathfinder. Says the man who loves you, he corrected gently. Their ship touched down in the center of the settlement, where a small crowd had gathered to welcome them home from their latest mission. Among them stood Captain Forlag, his craggy face split in a wide grin as he spotted them through the viewport. Ready? Kale asked, powering down the ship's systems. Lyra nodded, her amber eyes shining with contentment and purpose. For anything, as long as we're together. Hand in hand, they stepped out to greet their new world. The thief and the alien who had found in each other a destiny neither could have imagined, and a love that transcended the stars themselves.